So I'm going to just start with an introduction to who we are. So Bryt Energy are a renewable electricity supplier for British businesses, and we solely supply electricity sourced from wind, solar and hydro. We're part of the Statkraft Group, who are Europe's largest generator of renewable electricity, and they've been operating for 125 years. Their passion for sustainability is very much embedded in our purpose as a business. In 2020, we launched Bryt by Nature, which is our programme for being a better business. If our purpose is why we do what we do, then Bryt by Nature is how we do it. Our 4 core values sit behind every decision that we make as a business, and each one is linked to 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals that we feel we can make the biggest difference to. I'll pull out some of the examples of what we do here because, to be honest, mainly I'm just really proud of it, but what it might also do is give an insight into what it's like working for a purpose-led organisation. So under Sustainable by Nature, we actually now use science-based targets initiatives to help reduce our own carbon emissions. Under Trusted by Nature, because we only supply natural renewable electricity, all of our customers report zero carbon on their scope 2 emissions, which is why we take our sustainable marketing very seriously, always making sure that it's transparent and accurate, so our customers can make sure that they're not reporting any misinformation and be at risk of any accusation of greenwashing. Under Passionate by Nature, we actually do quite a bit here, but one good example is our climate perks, where any employee that travels by land or sea rather than air gets that extra time back in travelling as annual leave, which is quite a nice one. And then finally, Pioneering by Nature is how we support our businesses in becoming a good grid citizen. So that's helping them to understand how and when they use their electricity to help balance the grid as the UK transitions to a net zero future. In a recent report, the IPCC stated that unless drastic action is taken by the middle of this century, we're going to exceed the 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. In the UK, the energy sector accounts for 25% of the overall emissions, which is why everyone in this room plays a key part in determining what kind of world we're going to leave to future generations. Our current government have ambitions to fully decarbonise our power system by 2035, which we all know is going to require an enormous amount of change to the way we generate, transport and consume electricity. But what impact is this change going to have on our electricity cost? I wanted to focus my presentation today on helping businesses to understand how they can navigate the financial risks and benefits as the UK transitions through this to net zero. So to do that, we first need to understand the basic economics of supply and demand. So starting with supply, and by that I mean generation, the UK's fuel mix has changed drastically over the years, with 36% now coming from a natural renewable source like hydro, wind and solar. It's really important to recognise that the characteristics of these technologies are really different to the traditional gas and fuel, with the most obvious one being that you can't control when it generates electricity. It literally relies on whether it's windy or sunny. In addition to this, we're moving away from the linear big fossil fuel to consumer model to a more decentralised ecosystem where you've got pockets of small scale development being developed more locally, which presents a whole new set of challenges for the UK as we need to consider capacity and infrastructure requirements at a more local level rather than a national level. On the demand side of things, there's going to be an increased uptake of low carbon technology with the electrification of heat and transport as we move away from the traditional fossil fuels. So I've taken an example here of a single business, but you can imagine this demand on a UK-wide scale. So this is the consumption profile over a 24-hour period for a business. It's your traditional, some base load consumption overnight to keep the building ticking over. Someone comes in at 6 a.m, turns everything on, ramps up the consumption, it stays nice and steady throughout the day, and then drops in the afternoon or in the evening when everyone goes home. The only variation that we used to see to this was Christmas shutdowns or changing shift patterns. But what we're now seeing is the electrification of heat is increasing the demand in the day more than what it used to be. The installation of EV charge points is seeing an increase in overnight consumption where businesses may be charging their fleet overnight ready for the next day. Or a dip in the middle of the day in their consumption where they've installed on-site solar, which means they're generating their own electricity rather than drawing it from the grid. So to summarise, as we transition these technologies, both supply and demand characteristics are going to evolve, and that's going to have an impact on our wholesale electricity prices. It's really difficult to say today what that impact is going to look like because we don't know what that future supply and demand picture looks like at the moment or how it's going to evolve. But what we do know about renewable generation is we can expect bigger swings in wholesale prices within day and more unpredictability. We're already seeing more frequent negative half-hour system prices when it's sunny, windy and low demand days. There's a trend emerging at the moment where, because of the amount of on-site solar or standalone solar being added to the grid, that peak price between 11 and 3 starting to dampen and could even be negative in the future. It's not difficult to imagine a world where, because everyone's moved to electric vehicles and they're charging their vehicles overnight, that the off-peak power price overnight starts to rise. So what does that mean for customers contracting their supply? So unless you tell your supplier otherwise, they will assume that you're going to use the same amount of electricity on the same consumption profile that you did the previous 12 months. And many businesses, depending on what their purchasing strategy looks like, could buy that energy based on that forecast up to 3 years in advance. But if that customer during that time starts to make changes to their site that's going to impact their demand, like adding on solar or EV charge points, what they actually consume is going to be different to what they forecasted, which means there's going to be half-hour points of overconsumption from what they forecasted, which they need to buy, and half-hour points of underconsumption that they need to sell back. And based on what we've just seen in terms of the more swings in the market price, that could leave businesses open to large financial gains or losses. So how can businesses manage this? So first of all, understand your consumption. As we already heard from the talk today from Stark, get hold of your half-hourly consumption data, or more granular than that if you can. Understand what it is that is driving your electricity consumption profile. Secondly, have a holistic long-term energy strategy and make sure you're including people within the business where energy may not have been on their agenda. So an example that we're seeing at the moment where someone in the business has been responsible for fleet and they've changed over to electric vehicles, installed charge points, but haven't looped that into the wider energy strategy, and now that's impacting their energy demand profile. Thirdly, collaborate with your supplier. So your supplier doesn't know what you're going to consume until you've consumed it. So if you know that you're going to make changes on site, and that's going to impact your demand profile, rather than leaving it to the half-hourly system price and accept whatever price that is, proactively manage that and have those communications and those conversations with your supplier in advance to try and mitigate any cost risks. And finally, there's a change in mindset needed. So it's long been recognised by businesses that if they consume less energy through energy efficiency programs, it's going to cost them less and it's going to help them meet their carbon targets. But many are still yet to catch up with the concept of when they use electricity and how that can impact your energy cost and help support the grid balance the system. Bryt have already started to work with some of our customers to actually take that a step further. We're actually remotely taking control of assets on site to optimise their demand in line with the day-ahead market price signals. So if we take that example customer from earlier, where they've installed solar and EV charge points, and we imagine a scenario where the peak prices between 11 and 3 have dropped massively because the amount of solar generation on the grid, the return on their investment on their solar panels has now dropped. And then we're in a scenario where the overnight prices have increased because of the amount of people that are charging their electric vehicles overnight. It's now costing them so much more to charge their EV fleet overnight. By installing a battery and using our optimization services, they could charge the battery in the middle of the day using their solar generation and then discharge it when prices are higher to then charge their electric vehicle fleet. It's difficult, as we mentioned earlier, it's difficult to say exactly what that new price profile is going to look like in the future, but by having the ability to adapt your demand and synchronise that in line with the market price is going to help reduce costs for businesses, but also help balance the UK grid.